Hi, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to those of you who are joining us from across the world today for another edition of Pandemic Punditry brought to you by the Content Experience Company. We are delighted and honored to have with us Elizabeth Alfano, an award-winning media personality, successful businesswoman, and keen investor. She is the founder of Plant Powered Consulting, an agency that helps brands navigate the plant-based landscape with communications, media marketing, and her vast network. She's also the co-founder of Wedge Tech, the Global Vegan Impact Innovation Index. As one of the foremost plant-based business experts in North America, Elizabeth speaks on the latest plant-based developments, analysis, and trends around the nation on major media outlets. She's also hosts the weekly series, The Plant-Based Business Hour. Welcome to Pandemic Punditry, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have sort of a fellow voice for good, I guess, on the show. We are thrilled that you're joining us. I know that as a well-known media personality in the plant-based space, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got started and why you were inspired to do what you do?
Sure. Are you talking from the business standpoint? Or are you talking from the personal standpoint?
A little bit of both would be great if you're comfortable.
Yeah. So I've told this story a bunch, but I actually think it's a good story in the sense that, obviously I'm in the media as well as consulting, and it's always been an important personal trait, if you will, that I wanted to find my voice. Obviously now I have it, but for the longest time I didn't. So when I was a kid, like 5 years old, 6 years old, as early as I can remember, I didn't want to chew meat. I didn't like it. I didn't like the texture. I didn't want to have to fight against the muscle. Of course, I never could have told you about factory farms. I was a kid at 5 years old, but I knew inherently that it was not for me, not just because of the taste, but I just knew that something was off here. So my folks who, there's no problem. They love me. I love them back. They were paranoid that I was going to die. Their kid wasn't going to have protein. And so they really panicked, and they were pretty strict parents. So they punished me pretty severely. They said, okay, you cannot leave the table. The rest of us are going to go and hang out together and watch TV and be a family. You cannot come. But I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't, I wasn't being capricious. I couldn't eat the meat. So I would sit there 2 hours, 3 hours. Well, ultimately this would happen, every night, every other night. So I would start hiding the meat all over the house. I'd hide it in my pants pockets. I'd dig in the garbage, and I'd hide it at the bottom of the garbage. I'd hide it underneath the table. Well, they found the meat and then punished me for lying. So then I was really in trouble. Fast forward like 40 years later. So I'm way into my 40s at this point. And I'm still thinking, I have to eat meat because that's what people do. That's the rule that has been really put in my head. There's no way around it. And, at this point, I know what factory farming is. So my sense of what it means to be an adult at this point is being an adult means you do that which you know is wrong, and you do it anyway. So I'm living with this like, oh gosh, I have to do this thing that I know isn't right, but everybody else is doing it. And I'm living in the Midwest, there's kind of no way around it. So I would on my own have vegetarian meals and, not talk about it, not make a big scene, didn't want to upset people because I wasn't eating their meat. But of course, if people would order pepperoni pizza, things that didn't have a lot of chewing, I would partake in that. And then I'm like 48, 49 at this point. My nephew comes home from the University of Oregon, where he's an athlete, walks in the door for Thanksgiving, and he says, oh yeah, coach says if I'm going to play for the team, no meat, no dairy. And I was like, I will not swear here. I'll just say, what the flip? You got a professional to give you permission to go vegan, because I'd been waiting for permission from an authority figure my whole life. Well, I was vegan, that sentence. And as you know, once you go vegan, you think, well, why isn't the rest of my life vegan? So once I decided, because I'd been waiting a long time and I finally had my voice, and I thought, okay, I know what I'm doing now. Not only am I going vegan, but everybody else who can come with me is going to go vegan as well. So I just switched over my business and my journalism. And so that's how I wound up here.
Everything went wrong. Yeah, it's funny. If people ask me, whether I have any regrets about life in general, and the one regret I have, and I'm the first to say the first regret, I guess, it's not so long list, but a reasonable list, is that I didn't go vegan quicker. I went vegan when I turned 50. 5 years ago, and that was one of the best decisions. And I always wonder why I didn't do that earlier. I mean, from a health perspective, and
Yeah.
now it's funny, I did it for my health, but once you're sort of in it and you understand everything that goes into kind of getting that steak on your plate, and I was an avid steak guy, I love my steak medium rare. It's abhorrent. I mean, you get this. It may be because you're having less of those sort of hormones, and your innate compassion comes out, and
Yes.
you just have this great compassion that wells in you now,
Yes.
and you just can't do it. I mean, people
Yeah.
ask me, do you miss meat? I'm like, yeah, I miss the taste of it, but I don't miss eating it. I think, I
Right.
mean, I can smell it. I know what it's supposed to taste like, and I say, oh yeah, I know what that tastes like, but I never, other than the first year where it was a little hard once in a while, I've said no. It doesn't appeal to me at all. In fact, somebody could be eating it right next to me. I mean, it bothers me from a sort of a perspective that they're still continuing to hurt themselves and the planet by doing
Yeah.
that. But it doesn't offend me. Like, I have to go somewhere, sort of avoidance, right? I mean, I'm so in peace with that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the best one I've ever taken. I mean, from a lot of perspectives. So I can hear you. And it took me a long time to give myself permission to go that way. I mean, a doctor pretty much had to tell me, authority, right?
Oh, it
Stop it
was a
or you're going to
doctor.
die. Yeah.
Oh,
That was
so
my
you
doctor.
came at it really from the health perspective.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, I figured when I went vegan, oh, hey, I'm probably going to shed a little weight, woohoo. And I did. Okay, just a little bit, so, 5, 7, 8 pounds, woohoo, I'll take it
20
for
kilos.
sure. 20 kilos,
Yeah.
20 kilos, 45 pounds.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get that benefit. Gosh darn it. Yeah, wow,
You
that's
don't
a
need
good
to.
one.
You haven't seen
Well,
pictures of me before.
gosh.
So, yeah.
Well, I shed, okay, so like you, I shed a little bit of weight, and I naturally have a lot of energy. I'll say for me right now, it's 11:30 p.m., but I'm still I've got a lot of energy just naturally, but even got a little extra burst. Okay, fine, great. What I didn't realize is that by leading my life in a way that wasn't aligned with my values, and by ignoring my own voice, I was carrying around this huge burden. And once I didn't have to carry that denial of like, I'm doing the wrong thing and I know it's wrong, but oh shoot, and how do I figure out a way to around this? I didn't have to worry about that anymore. And I really lifted a big weight off my shoulders, and I just felt so much lighter. And like you say, it's probably, you're not eating that stuff. And so, you feel lighter, and your compassion comes out. But I just didn't realize the burden I was carrying by eating this stuff that just did not align with my values.
Yeah. I think it's life affirming, life changing. I don't think people who haven't gone through that journey quite appreciate that. They always think of it as some kind of thing you're giving up.
Yeah.
That it's some kind of abstinence, or something that's so sort of, I guess, a penance, right? They
Right.
always see it as a penance, and for me, it's completely the opposite, right? It's been sort of, I mean, my life has been more enriched by just simply giving up that, and I also, I think, got an appreciation of people and addiction, because I think I'm a lot more.
Mhm.
I was never judgmental. I was very sympathetic, but having sort of gone off food, you just suddenly realize that some foods are highly addictive, and it is actually an addiction. It's you crave something. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, your body's getting enough of whatever it needs. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but it's an addiction, and so you get a more empathy, I guess, for people who are going through that, whether they're trying to quit smoking or drugs or whatever else they're addicted to. Food is equally addictive.
Yes, very much so. Certainly, I know that with sugar. So I'll say that, like, don't give me one vegan cookie, because that, I'll want 12 vegan cookies. But I know a lot of people feel that way about meat. I never did. And certainly people feel that way about cheese. And it's funny because cheese,
Yeah,
like everybody, I thought cheese is,
yeah,
what am I going to do about pizza? And how am I going to get around this? But then, I got this permission, and I was like, I'll find a way, particularly because for the animal, I'm an animal lover, and of course my health and the planet, and people just in general. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to make up for these decades that I was doing something, even though I knew it wasn't the right thing. And then I really committed myself to using my voice. It's the strongest tool I'll ever have. And so I commit a lot of hours to what I do, the Plant-Based Business Hour. And I have no sponsors. I'm not in it for the money. It's completely a volunteer thing, because I just want to encourage others to find their voice. It is the strongest tool you will ever have to advocate for yourself and anything else you believe in. So I like to, spread the information just like you do here. And thank you you for doing it. So I committed myself to finding my voice. But then also, like you say, everyone said, oh, you're going to give up things. And I wasn't concerned about that. I just had to get to where I wanted to be. I'd been held back so long. But I did think like everybody else, oh, I'm probably going to have less of things. What the heck? Who had been keeping sweet potatoes from me, eggplant from me? I mean, once I got out of that rut of a ham and cheese sandwich, and I started looking at all the other things I could make, I realized, wow, my life on meat and dairy had actually been very small. My
Yeah.
life on veggies is very big.
Yeah, I mean, you can eat the entire grocery vegetable aisle, right? And you can do that in one meal. Sometimes you get, I always count the number of products that go into a meal, and from meat and potatoes, which is like 2 or 3 things, this becomes a whole different. You're essentially eating the whole grocery aisle, all the colors of the
Yeah.
rainbow. It's
Yeah.
fascinating, and I'm sure your body appreciates that. I know mine does. So
Mine does too.
so it's great. So Elizabeth, if I think you had sort of a very interesting journey, starting from brand manager for the Kellogg Company, Frosted Mini Wheats, was your sort of
Special
thing that you were
K.
promoting, Special K,
Yeah.
and then you went, become a gallery owner, you became a designer and media personality, and now investor. So, what are some of the, if you were to pass on a few career or life lessons to people, what would those sort of things be? If you were to retrospect a little bit and say, hey, these are the things I think I would have done better or differently, or I think you might want to consider.
Okay. If I look down, it's because I'm writing notes to myself, because as we get like close to midnight, I'm going to get a little foggy.
Yeah,
So
we'll make this shorter.
No, I don't want it to be short. I want to
Okay,
stay
fine.
for as long as we can, but I just might have to write myself a little bit of notes.
No,
Okay.
take
So,
your time. Yeah.
here's what I learned when I started my business, which I did run for 10 years, which was an international business until I exited. It's not who's the smartest. It's not who's the prettiest. It's not who has the best connections. It's not even who's the wealthiest. And believe it or not, it's not who's the smartest. It's those who are willing to work the hardest and those who can make their money last the longest. Those are the people who make it to the end of the race. So that is my big knowledge drop, if you will. Don't spend all your money. And you do have to balance, you can't get things for free all the time. At some point you have to leave the stage of begging your friends and family to pay for things or help you, or, at some point you have to start paying for things, but really budget out and make that money last. And I really say that because now as we see investment dollars falling from the sky for plant-based business, it's just like this cascading waterfall of money, money, money. And you're seeing brands pop up all the time and they're going to get these raises. I've been sitting in investor meetings. Hope I'm not straggling off in too many directions here. I'll try to wrap it back to my point here. But I've been sitting in investor meetings and people are like, well, I don't know. The valuation is going to be 10 or 13, somewhere in there. And you're like, oh my God, who's doing the numbers here? How can you back up this valuation? You don't even have a product in market yet. Okay. So everyone's used to money flowing and hitting you on the head. It's not always going to be the case. So I would really get that skill set under your belt to make that money last the longest. And, no way around the hours. You got to do the work.
Yeah, excellent advice, actually. Yeah, and especially when what you're talking about is exactly what's happening in the market today, right? There's a lot of dollars flowing in from all over the world, actually, from investors.
Thank God. Yeah, it's like everybody's on smack, just really crazy money coming out.
Yeah, it was in the middle of the pandemic, what was it, 2.9 billion for alternative smart proteins last year?
I thought it was 3.1 even.
3.1,
yeah.
That's right.
3.1, which, by the way, was more than all of 2010 through 2019. That
Correct.
was 3. And then in 2020, it was 3.1. Yeah. So, and then that's just a drop in the bucket of what's about to come. I do think there's a tsunami out there of money that's coming.
Yeah,
there's not.
Yeah, and there's lots of investors who were never in that space, who had no affinity for that space. All of a sudden, they've added that line item into their portfolio or mission statement as an investing organization. It's interesting. It's a good thing in one way. That's from a planet perspective, but as you've so rightly identified, it has repercussions as well, right? So especially on a personal level.
It's so interesting. There's so much to unpack there. So there's the corporate entities that are coming in, and the individuals who have lots of money who are coming in who aren't mission aligned. And I'm interested to see if they follow our lead or they try to push us to their lead. I was in another meeting of a raise, and one of the people who wanted to be a lead investor, one of their contingencies was at some point the company had to be open to potentially having meat products. And we were all like, do you have any idea who you're dealing with here? Yeah, no one's going to, yeah, you can, the door's over there. I mean, it was just an absurd sort of conversation. So we'll wait to see how that all shakes out. And I'm a little bit segueing here, but if you shift from the big money coming in to the brand side, part of what has made the market so strong has been all these little Davids, not the Goliaths, but the Davids. The millennials and Gen Z are so adverse to the big corporations, and they don't trust them, and they don't believe them, and they don't like how they move through the world, and they don't communicate with them correctly. That's a lot of what I do through Plant Powered Consulting, is working on those really bespoke conversations with Gen Z and millennials for these plant-based brands. And the small brands have been so nimble, and they really get the new generation, and they're talking to them, and they've captured that zeitgeist in a way that the corporations haven't. And that's been our success, is that we aren't big and corporate. We are little and nimble, and the voice of a new generation. So, with all this money coming in and bigger corporations coming in, I hope that dynamic doesn't shift.
So let me ask sort of a philosophical question then. So we have all these sort of, so these young sort of dynamic startups, who are very attuned to sort of the Gen Zs and the millennials, making significant sort of inroads into and forays into areas of the plant-based space. That's very interesting for multiple reasons. And then you have sort of these larger corporates who've been in the food business for a long time, right? The bigger brands. Who also are now really interested. They've seen the sort of the tea leaves, right? And they and no longer is it a fad. It's not a trend. It's actually here. So they're sort of running in to sort of catch up and investing either through funds or independently directly with these young companies that you're advising in some cases. So what should they do? I mean, in one way, don't we want to encourage these larger companies to adopt this? And in another way, it's also sort of, you're wondering whether you'll be co-opted, right? So this is this balance. So what would you do to advise a company like that who's maybe now fielding an offer from a larger non-plant-based entity who seems keen to get into the space and wants to invest in your venture? And
Yes.
how do you sort of navigate that? Am I being co-opted or am I being supported, right?
Yes. So much to unpack here. So take that money. Oh my God. Take the money. Take the money, but you don't have to sell out to take the money. And in fact, the more you hold your ground, the more value you have as a brand, because if you become co-opted, you are nothing. You are just what they were 20 years ago, and that's failed. And everyone doesn't want that anymore. So your brand loses value, but you also lose value as a negotiator. So you just have to be prepared, take that money, figure out a way to negotiate it, that you call the shots for your brand, and it's not going to be the other way around. So take their money, but don't let them lead you.
Very good advice.
You really need to lead them. This is a whole world. And they don't really have the memo yet. They know they want to hop on. For example, I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting with a multinational corporation, and they were saying, okay, we've got the distribution channels, we've got the money, we've got the ingredients, we've got the scientists, we can put together the burger. We put our burger on the market, it's not selling. And I was like, well, do you even know who you're talking to? Does your brand have any personality? Have you worked out any sort of reason or passion why you've made the burger? And they were like, well, no, we made it plant-based because that's what everybody wants. Okay, they were so disconnected from the product and the market that, that wasn't going to go anywhere. And they revamped and they've worked on it. And I'm not throwing them under the bus. They're learning and they're going to shift. They'll get it. Obviously, again, they have the people and the power and the budgets to do it. But, Seth Tibbett, I interviewed him. He's the founder of Tofurky. I interviewed him on the Plant-Based Business Hour, and he said, and I really think this is true, the secret weapon that makes vegans into superheroes is that they're passionate. And it comes through in everything you do as long as you stay true to that passion. And that's going to come out in your voice as a brand. The market's going to feel it. Your Gen Z millennials, they're going to hear you, and you're going to have that authentic connection that's going to make you very powerful in terms of growing and really forming a market. So back to finding your voice and knowing your passion.
And I think there's a little bit of interesting nugget there for investors, maybe also that you just shared. And maybe let me try and make more explicit. So I think when you're trying to you have two sort of opportunities you can invest in. I think what you're saying is key in on that founder or that is passionate and truly mission aligned, as opposed to somebody who used to do something else before and then finally figured, oh yeah, I could do that also, right? But doesn't have that burning passion or desire or need to sort of transform the world, right? So if you had A and B option, you would pick the one that had the founder that obviously,
Yes, because in business, just like in life, you only want to hang out with people who get the vision.
Yep.
If they don't get the vision, then it's not that much fun to hang out with them.
Yeah, and I've actually seen enough sort of activity now in what I also do that there are a lot of investors who are just throwing money also on. And I talk to some of these founders, and I don't find that fire burning inside them. No. So I wonder how long it's going to actually, or whether it's actually going to, reach a critical mass for the investor to get a return. Because I find that they're just kind of going through the motions of, I mean, they talk the lingo and they're good story and all that, but inside I don't feel that they have it, right? And that's a ingredient.
And it makes a big difference. Yeah.
Oh, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference. Yeah. So, okay. So on branding, because you're an expert in this area, so what advice would you give like either a plant-based, somebody, a corporate like you just described, or a entrepreneur coming into the space? When it comes to positioning their product, should they self-identify themselves and their product as vegan, or should they identify as plant-based, or should they call themselves something else altogether?
I mean, it really depends on the product, I think. And more than anything, it depends on who you're trying to speak to. If you're trying to speak to vegans, that 3%, and if that's your market, you can do good business on that 3% if you really nail it, then go for vegan. But if you're going for the flexitarian market, you maybe don't even need to mention plant-based at all, or you might mention plant-based, who knows? It depends kind of on your strategy. But you can go for the larger market, which isn't necessarily better. It's obviously larger, but you can make a lot of money off that 3%. But if you go for the larger market, then you wouldn't use the word vegan. You'd go plant-based or, just other things. I mean, healthy doesn't say much anymore. Organic doesn't say much anymore. And sadly, plant-based doesn't really say that much anymore. Right. So I'm not saying don't have plant-based on there somewhere on your packaging, but don't hang your hat on that. It's not enough anymore. It's plant-based for athletes, or it's plant-based for kids. Now you're seeing vegan brands, plant-based brands come along for like milk that has, cartoon characters on it, really like kids brands, so who are you going for in that plant-based space? I talk about this a lot, but plant-based is no longer enough. Like that doesn't cut it.
That's like a 40,000 foot category now, right?
Yes, right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's excellent advice. I think brands, especially in where I am in India and in South Asia, I think they're just kind of coming to maturity here and trying and working towards sort of getting their products to market. And I think they have a lot of questions around how they should position themselves, mainly because of this. And sometimes they sort of revert back to what the brands in the US or UK did, 10 years ago, when they came out as maybe vegan or plant-based. Yeah. And I think, they have a visceral reaction. I think the word vegan is almost like, people, there's lots of studies backing me up on this one, that, vegan has so much negative connotations next to it that it probably, unless you're targeting that market, so as you said, specifically, I think it's not going to do you any favors if you're going after the flexitarian market, or meat eaters, in general.
Yeah.
So great advice. So along these things, and you hinted at this a little bit on the niching down and sort of looking at these micro trends. What are some of the trends that you are seeing that is sort of exciting in the plant-based space?
Well, the materials, the alt materials market is going to parallel the alt protein market. So you're seeing that. You're starting to see mushroom leathers come on. Hermes just came out with one of their classic bags. I think it's called the Victoria bag. And Stella McCartney just put out a couple of vegan leather options for the Victoria and Albert Museum. So yeah, you guys are hearing all the news too. Myco Works is getting big funding, et cetera. So I think the alt materials market is one to watch, and I'm just thrilled about this. Seafood, you know, so it's not just that Seaspiracy is out, but it's not just that. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
it's very much like everything that we're talking about. I'd love to say that it's because vegans are on a street corner with a sign that the world is changing. I love those people who hang out with the sign. I've been one of them, and I've been there, but it's not really that, and it's not really that people are more interested in their health. In my opinion, the reason that we're going plant-based is because corporations are doing math on the back of a napkin, and they're saying, well, there's 7 billion people in the world, but we're going to 10 billion people, but we're not getting more land and we're not getting more water. It's pretty easy math. It's just not going to work out. You're going to have to find a more efficient food supply system. With that, you have corporations trying to find a new way. Yes, you have lobbyists holding us back, and of course, they're loudmouths everywhere. I understand that, but corporations really don't have a choice. So you're looking at like Cargill, which is readily by their own accord changing their name from a meat company to a protein company, and they're deeply getting invested in plant-based. And that's just one. I could Maple Leaf and
Tyson's food.
JBS and
Yeah.
Dyson. And yes,
Yeah.
right. So these are you put those three things together, and then you add a pandemic. So where people are starting to say like, hey, I don't really trust that you have my best interest at heart. I better figure this out for myself. How can I be healthy? Oh, okay. I've done some Googling. I guess it's plant-based. So you have all these factors coming together, and it's critical. And I've lost the train of thought to the original question, but it's somehow linked.
No, it's so what are the trends that you're seeing? So you said seafood?
Oh yeah. So seafood, right.
Alternate.
Seafood, and that is really being pushed by the oceans. That's how I started that long thing. And last time I was traveling in Italy, we were getting up, we were doing some early hiking, and we thought, oh, we'll start at the sea and then we'll do our big hike. And we saw all the fishermen come in that morning. There were nothing. There were, huge boats coming in. These people, you could see that this is what they were used to doing for their entire careers. They had nothing. They had like 7 fish for like 20 people, and they had been out fishing for, hours. So it's just, you don't even have to watch Seaspiracy. It's pretty obvious. Like there's just nothing left to the oceans, not to mention all the damage and plastics, et cetera. So seafood is definitely there. Leather is definitely there. I'm seeing a big focus on personal nutrition. Again, it's been sped up by the pandemic, but a lot of people looking for micronutrients and functional proteins like elixirs, and just making sure they're getting their zinc and their micronutrients, et cetera. So I see a big push on health. And yeah, I mean, I guess 2021 is going to be the year of the chicken, as they say. We'll see. I haven't been seeing as much as that as I thought I would have.
Okay. In terms of alternatives for chicken.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought I'd see so many more brands coming out. I mean, of course, there's vegan fried chicken that's coming out of the UK from VFC from Matthew Glover, which is fantastic. And every brand has a chicken brand, right? Beyond Meat has one, Hungry Planet has one. I mean, everyone has their chicken strips, but no one seems to lead with it. Like this is the big to do. So, and of course there's Nugs and Christy Lagali with Rebellious, whom I love, doing great work. But yeah, I thought chicken would have had a little bit more hype than it does at the moment.
Yeah, interesting you talk about chicken. I was in Anuga 2019, and it was funny. All the chicken that I tried, all the alternatives, unlike the meat alternatives or the beef alternatives, they always had a little bit of an aftertaste. It's like subtle to me. And then other people have said that I think they haven't quite cracked it because it's sort of a white meat, right? It's a more neutral meat,
yes,
so you can't really disguise that with a little spices here and there. It's I mean, let's be honest, chicken's pretty plain. I mean, it has got very little
meant
flavor,
to be plain.
Right? Yeah, so if you take simple ingredients and whatever protein you use, with it soy or pea or whatever else, that little bit of taste seemed to come through because it's just
plain white meat. And
Yeah.
I think that's where and I think the VFC is a nice idea where you're sort of crumbing it and flavoring it, so you can mask some of those the flavors, and maybe that's why they're being successful. So I think that may be the secret there. The just a regular plain white chicken breast kind of thing, where you impart the flavor, I think is going to be a bit of a challenge. But hey, look, with the way the industry and the technology is improving every day, anything is possible in the plant-based space. Absolutely anything.
Yeah, and I think what's so exciting is to see fermented proteins just leap to the front of the line, not just for investment dollars. So they were sort of non-existent a year ago, and now they're taking up a third of the investment dollars. But you're also seeing the applications come through with companies like Change Foods, Perfect Day, Real Dairy, Remilk, I think is the word. Yeah. So yeah. So you're just seeing that really leap to the front, and I'm really excited for what that could bring. Even companies like Nature's Find with their biomass. So not precision fermentation, but biomass fermentation. Right. So just a really exciting science there. And I think here's a trend. I don't know if you can say this. This is sort of a B2B trend, not a B2C trend.
Right.
Fats. So I think you're really, for so long they were working on plant-based proteins. Now I think you're going to see people really work on plant-based fats, because coconut fats doesn't really cut it. It runs out when you heat the product. It right. runs out. And then there's the environmental concern about coconuts and over-farming coconuts. So I think you're going to see an upgrade to plant-based fats, which is really interesting. And I think fiber is going to be the new protein. So these are sort of B2B things, but I think people are realizing for their health that it's really not how much protein, because none of us are really suffering from a lack of protein, but we're all suffering from a lack of fiber. Well, maybe not vegans, but certainly the 97% of flexitarians are. So I think fiber is going to take center stage again.
Yeah, and it's also very important to the microbiome, right? So the fiber connection
100%.
to the microbiome. So I think in that sense, the good fiber, the good carbs are back in some sense through fiber.
Yeah, it's critical that you can't be healthy without fiber. You just can't.
You just can't.
And
it's impossible.
Meat has no fiber. I didn't know this.
Neither does dairy.
No, of course not. Animal proteins, no fiber. Because the cows and the animals are so good at processing, they get rid of all the fiber, and they only keep the saturated fats and animal proteins, which is going to make you sick. But and I didn't know that, because when you look at meat, you just think, well, that's going to have fiber. At least I did. I looked at it.
Yeah, it feels pretty firm, doesn't it?
Doesn't it seem like fibrous, right?
Fibrous, right.
Yeah. But no, zero fiber. And you just cannot be healthy without fiber. It's just not possible.
So there's a question from one of the audience members who wants to know, how do you really make the money last longer? Any tips on that?
Well, you have to be disciplined, so a plan really comes in handy here, so that you're only spending a certain amount and you're only allowing yourself a certain amount of expenditures depending on if you hit that sales goal. So you're constantly monitoring it. And maybe you have another raise in mind. I mean, it all depends on your business model too. So some businesses are very capital intensive. You need to buy machinery. If, let's say your business model is a co-manufacturing plant, because there aren't that many co-manufacturing plants that can handle plant-based goods. And that's a real bottleneck issue for plant-based brands. So one might say, well, maybe that's a business I want to get into. Okay, well, you're going to need a lot of capital investment. Clearly, that's a lot of expenditure. But, just got to stick to those numbers that you have in your budget and know that budget, and just make sure you're always staying in line. Because when you don't keep your eyes on the numbers and you let them get away from you, you'll find yourself, whoops, I overspent. And then, you can get yourself into trouble. So make that money last as long as you can. A plan is really helpful here.
So the person that asked the question, she's a pioneer in vegan ice creams in India. Her brand, White Carb, was the first vegan ice cream brand, and they have, I think, pan-India distribution now. So that's the source of that question. Just to give you some context.
Yeah.
So we talked about the sort of the exciting things, right? What are some of the less exciting sort of Me Too trends you're seeing in the plant-based space that and how could they sort of maybe pivot to doing something else? I mean, like, for example, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, which is, do we need another plant-based milk, for example? But we do need another plant-based milk targeted at
kids.
A specific good. Yes. So is that how so just following a trend doesn't necessarily make it successful, but you might want to think another step deeper. I think it was your advice where the kids thing milk was concerned.
100%. Yeah, you have to look where there are holes in the marketplace, because ultimately, when you're finding your brand voice and who you are and what you stand for and how you're going to communicate, a big part of that communication is, what problem do you solve for the consumer that no one else is solving? So you do have to have a reason for being. You can't just be a copycat brand. I mean, yes, there are some brands that can raise a lot of money because they're going to make the better chicken nugget. And, one could argue that we still haven't cracked the code for cheese. And so there are many vegan cheeses, but, keep going at it, because,
Right.
we could use a better one there, perhaps. But it's, even in that vegan cheese world, you might be able to solve something like it's vegan cheese, but without the processed oils or what have you. But you have to find, a solution for that consumer. And then that starts your relationship and how you talk to them. So that's one thing I see this so much. So many of the plant-based founders, they started in their kitchen. Again, there are these people that have passion, and they thought, well, I don't want to eat this stuff, so I'm going to make my own stuff. And then they liked it, and then they progressed from there, and then they went out and they got money, and then they focused on R&D, and they like their name, and maybe they did packaging, but they haven't thought at all about, what's my communication strategy? How am I going to let my consumers know? What problem am I solving for them? And how can I make that relationship long and loyal, and just, really develop it like it's this intimate personal relationship? So they seem to never think about that until they're like, oh, I finally made it to market. I got distribution. I have a product. It's, I went through all the regulations. Now I have to sell it. And I kind of forgot about that. So I work with people a lot in this area. And so I would just say, really figure out what your product solves for for the consumer.
Yeah. So that was, those are some cautionary flags that you're raising. Anything else in that area that you're seeing that people seem to be rushing into that maybe ill advice at this time, or maybe needs further thought? I'm putting you in the spot a little bit here.
No. It's in my head. I just a little late,
Yeah.
but let's see. Here's one thing, but this is maybe just a personal thing. So I think the brand will never say this, but I think when Light Life went and attacked Beyond Meat and Impossible, I just don't see how that worked out well for them. That just seemed like a desperate move. Not to mention that they pissed off, upset the 3%. But even from the flexitarian standpoint, it just seemed like, it's kind of desperate, we talked about trends. I do think you're going to see whole food plant-based come to the forefront, just like you're going to see fiber. And I do think you're going to see cleaner labels and cleaner ingredients. And that's not just a trend that you're going to see, but we're talking about, how do you solve problems for the consumer? That is a
Right.
problem for the consumer, right? Some of the vegan products have these long labels. Some of the things you can't pronounce. Not everybody wants that. So I think, if you can do a cleaner label chicken, or if you can do a cleaner label pork, that's not a Me Too product. That is a very differentiated product. So when you think about all the foods that are out there that are not vegan, why would you make another burger? I sort of don't get that. There's so many burgers out there. There's so many other things that need to be made, go make them, which is why I love to see that whole cuts of meat are now really something that people are focusing on. And that's been a white space that we need. So that's really good. What else am I seeing? So, don't attack your small vegan competitor. Go get the 97% of the market that's out there for
talking
meat.
about whole cuts of meat, you are working with Juicy Marbles, right?
I am.
Tell us a little bit about that story. I've seen the video clips and I've signed up for the free sample. I don't think they're going to send it all the way to New Delhi, but
Try.
yeah. Well, I figured that was worth a try. That's why I signed up. But interesting story coming from a different part of the world. And it looks fabulous. So if and I'm hoping to have them on the show at some point, thanks to you. But tell me a little bit about what they're doing and why you find them so compelling.
Well, they've nailed plant-based steaks. So, what's not compelling about that? And these are whole cuts of meat, thick, like if for those of you, maybe you remember back in your meat eating days, filet mignon. So it's a smaller cut of meat, but really thick. It's an expensive cut of meat. So this is something right there. They've got a big differentiating point from meat because they can lower the price, make it accessible to everyone. Obviously, it's going to be healthier. It's going to have some fiber and just not have all the animal proteins. A filet mignon, as I understand it, there's only one per animal. So you imagine how large a cow is, what an enormous waste. Obviously, the other parts of the cow are used in other ways, but this is just one piece of an animal. So again, making it very rare. They can make it mass accessible, but they've also nailed the texture, nailed the taste, nailed the cooking experience. So just like raw meat, it comes to you as raw meat and you cook it up. Unlike Beyond Meat or something where it's basically already cooked and you're heating it up or warming it up. Right. Yeah, no, this is you are cooking it, and you can't overcook it, by the way. It's always going to be medium rare, but and so the smell is there. But here's what I was blown away by. They kept telling me that they had nailed the taste. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of prepared now. So the taste is great. The cooking experience is great. The shape, the look, the whole thing. The cutting, if you remember from your meat days, if you cut into meat, there's a little resistance, right? You're sort of, this is why I didn't like it. You're working against something. You're working against a muscle. So I expected that it would kind of fall apart, but it didn't. It held its, I was kind of working against something, not like a steak exactly, not that hard, but I was working against something, and the texture, the form stayed together. So, and I don't really care because I never liked meat, but my partner's only been vegan for about a year, and he's a big steak guy. He was over the moon. He was just really felt like they nailed it. So it's been very exciting. And the product comes out of Slovenia, just a sweet, sweet little country in Europe, former communist country, now not, but it's very sweet. So Slovenia, for those of you who don't know, is near northern Italy. So just a lovely company and a great group of guys with a great sense of humor who don't take themselves too seriously. So it's been really fun working with them as well.
Oh, I'm looking forward to having them on the show. And I think, we had the 3D printed steak company from Israel as well.
Meat Tech 3D.
No, Redefine Meat, right? So they just got $20 million, right? So they were printing the steaks out, and they were doing, they could do like a T-bone or ribeye or whatever, right? Also 100% plant-based.
Did you try those?
I have not, no, and I just realized they raised like $20 million, which I was telling Esha that congratulations. That's a great raise. It's good to see. It's you're going beyond that burger thing, which is another Me Too trend that And I also had a company called Actual Veggies where they went the other direction. They actually made a burger that looks just like the vegetables. They have an orange one and a purple one and a green one, right? So you can actually see the broccoli and everything in there. So, it's a counter thing. It was really smart of them to do that. So, Actual Veggies, and that was interesting as well. So I like, I like this sort of different takes on the same variation instead of just throwing out another burger, right? I think,
And I'll throw in another company that does a great job of, standing apart, Barbecue. They have a line of plant-based barbecue products. So it's really fun. And they're going after that. They're going after the whole United States, of course, but there's some states that are more into their barbecue than others, like Texas and Kansas and North Carolina. But it's its whole subculture, whole, big arena. Barbecue's very important to a lot of people. Some people like it sauced up. Some people like their barbecue, naked, and then they make their own sauce, and everyone thinks their sauce is the best. And there's all these sauce cook-offs. And so, they were very smart, I thought, to go for that and, go for pork. Really, no one's really nailing pork. Impossible Foods had a pork sausage out, but for a while they were like, we've nailed it, and then I just haven't seen it much anywhere. So, and of course bacon is coming, so we're excited about bacon for sure.
And
but
talking about pork, not even the cell-based side is doing a pork that I know of.
I know,
right? OmniPork is great, and David's doing a great job getting it everywhere, and he's an amazing. I had him on the show. It was an amazing conversation. But they're doing great on the plant-based stuff, but I haven't seen anything on the cell-based side. And, there's so many things around pork, right? Baby back ribs, pork chops, pork tenderloin, right? So, no one's taken that on, which seems to be interesting. Maybe it's in the wings and we're not hearing about it. But
but I'm sure you or I will hear about them soon.
I was going to say, we are hooked up. If anyone's going to know, it's you and me. Yeah, no, we would know.
Let's see.
Yeah. I think that bone thing is tricky for people. I think that's where they're getting stuck on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like ribs, tricky business.
Yeah. But at least if you can have the boneless ribs, right? Remember McRibs or something like that came out in McDonald's a long time ago, where they're taking out the bones. Yeah. So you could do something ribby-like, I guess, or riblet-like.
Ribby-like. Hey, you had brought up actual veggies. Have you tried actual veggies?
No, I have not, because in this part of the world, lots of things don't get here. Yeah. Have you tried it?
Okay. I wanted to try it. I was on their list. I was in an investor meeting with them. I was on their list to try their products, and that's why I was wondering. I wonder what they're up to. I should check back.
So I'll link you with them on LinkedIn. There. Yeah. So I'll do
great.
that. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Yeah. So they're really a great group of co-founders there. So
but they're doing well. Are they? Because they were getting funding. Did they get it?
Yeah, they got funding, and then I think they went on QVC and sold everything within like hours, right? And then so they've, I think, found now another co-packer, and they've sort of got their production together.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so they're funded by initially funded by Big Idea Ventures, and I think they're raising more money.
Great, that's just great.
So they were good. Okay, so if you were sort of, this is like a last question, right? So if we were in the work we do, right, we're trying to promote this new way of living for the planet and for ourselves, and for the brands that sort of make that happen and possible for all of us to sort of adopt these diets. Oops.
Hold on. Can I take a tiny break? A tiny break. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. I have a feeling that might happen. Okay. Hopefully this will. So sorry.
No. Stuff like that happens all the time. My Alexa once went on.
Studio here.
Yeah. So, what would be sort of, in sort of parting, what would you advise someone who wants to either amplify, a voice for good, get, start to sort of spread the news about what we do, right? Or this space does, or they want to sort of get into either a plant-based alternative protein space. What is one thing that, as an investor and as a media personality, that you would give to say, make sure you don't do this?
So an anti-tip that I would give to somebody.
Yes.
As a brand, or as like a new person who's on a plant-based diet?
Either one. Yeah.
And it's a don't tip. Okay. It's a don't tip. Okay, here's a don't tip. If you just are new to the plant-based diet, don't hang out with people who don't get the vision. So, if you're plant-based, try to find, people who get it, people who want to see you thrive, people who want to see you happy, people who want to see you healthy. This is actually just life in general, not if you're plant-based. You want to hang around with people who want these things for you. You don't want to be around people who are holding you back. So I would say don't hang out with people who don't get the vision, both for the brand and the dieter or the lifestyle change person.
No, spot on. Good, really good advice there. Yeah, it's true. You are somewhat the company that you keep, right? So you want a lot of people to enable you, not to discourage you, especially when you begin. Yeah, and that applies. I think it's a great answer, because it applies to both the business side of it and the personal journey. Yeah.
Yes, the whole thing.
Well very well said, Elizabeth. Sorry, I've been putting you on the spot a little bit more often than my other guests, because I know that you're capable of getting the answer. So I love the fact that we had this sort of uncanned conversation. We just took it wherever it went, and I really enjoyed our conversation. And I think we should look at ways that we collaborate as well ourselves. I would love to do that. I think we should explore that offline, and with other people. I'm going to have Sonali soon, the Green Queen person, on next week.
She's so awesome.
So I think we should collaborate. I think it would be great to sort of amplify this message, further and longer, and into areas that it hasn't gone before. I think. As you said, 2021 is the year.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay, but before we go, because I sense that you're wrapping up, I'm going to turn the tables on you. Okay, this is one of the questions that I love to end my
Uh,
plant-based business hour with. Are you
Please,
game? Okay, because
always.
I didn't prep you. Okay.
No, no,
Uh,
no.
what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Okay. So I know now, I think, how the food that's on my plate gets there and what goes into producing it. And I
Yeah.
was so ignorant. I mean, and I consider myself a smart guy, and I was so ignorant of what actually went in through my mouth. And also I was ignorant to what it actually did to my body. So I
Yeah.
mean, I was at death's door, literally, and
Oh,
and that's so my body finally just slapped me, right, and said, look,
wow.
wake up or you'll be dead. And the advice my doctor gave me in 2014 was that if you have more dairy, you will be dead in a year. I mean, he just told me that straight up. So I said, what do you mean I have to get off dairy right now? He said, well, if you want to live beyond the year, you would have to get off of dairy right now. I said, like today. She said, right today. If you're going to do it, you got to do it today. So cold turkey, Valentine's Day 2014, I got off dairy. I had no warning. I would have, eaten all the butter in the world if I had the chance before that. But he literally just spelt it out just like that. And he had a really
I,
great analogy. He said, if you were a petrol car, would you put diesel into it? What do you
oh,
think it would do to that car? I said, well, an engine will be destroyed. He said, well, that's exactly what you've been doing for the last, you know, decades, right? And you have not known, and you're wondering why all of these things are happening. Why you were in the ICU. This is why. It's food. It's killing you.
I
So I
know.
mean, that was just that first sort of brick that fell down, and I was like, my God, how could I be so ignorant about what goes into me? Because I was addicted to my taste, right? I mean, I'm a foodie. I love to cook. Um, so yeah, so that stuff really gets me, right? And it's like creative part of me. I used to paint when I was a kid, and so food was a way to sort of create, right? And be creative, and of course, you use all kinds of colors. And now I'm sort of retraining my sort of cooking skills to use
Okay.
plants. And by the way, that's a lot harder. I can still, I mean, I can still do a roast leg of lamb that was like outrageously good, but to do that with eggplant or something like that, that's exceptionally hard to make a really good vegetable dish, because vegetables are harder to cook than meat, believe it
Mhm.
or not. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. So, a bunch of questions I have for you, if you don't
Please.
mind. First of all, uh, it always bothers me that restaurants cling so much to meat, because I sort of say to myself, look, if you were a chef that had any real props, you'd be cooking vegetables, because
Yeah.
that's where the real skill set lies. Okay, that's just a side comment. When you were not feeling well and you went to this doctor, were you in India?
I was living in Sri Lanka,
Oh,
but a
Sri
friend of
Lanka.
mine said to fly down and see this doctor in India. And yeah, he saved my life actually. So and subsequently some of my family members as well, my wife as well. But yeah, he just bottom lined it for me,
Because
and
I don't think of Indian cuisine as having a lot of dairy.
so South India not, but North India yes. I mean, there is
Ah,
paneer and butter, and it's
yeah.
funny
Okay,
that
that's true. That's true.
that has gotten. I mean, if you historically look back, only the wealthy had dairy because it was,
Yeah.
it was a rare ingredient. Now, I mean, it is available in such copious amounts. India
Yes.
is the
Yeah.
largest producer and consumer of dairy in the world. So, in addition to 1.3 billion people, we have 340 million cows and totally
Mm.
520 million, somewhere around there, nearly over half a billion livestock, right? Cows
Yeah.
included. So,
Yeah.
the Indian farmer not only feeds 1.3 billion people, but it also feeds 520 some odd million livestock.
Yeah.
Pretty good job they're doing with very limited resources, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So so this is sort of a interesting conundrum, and dairy is like, India dairy is not just food, right? It's cultural, it's religious.
Yeah.
They bathe,
Yeah.
we bathe the idols with milk, right? You offer milk to the gods. I mean, so it's this is not something that you can say, don't drink milk, right? That's and by the way, a lot of people don't drink milk here, but they put milk in every other form. There's curd, there's yogurt, there's butter, there's cream, there's paneer, which is like a cottage cheese, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the ice cream. So they consume it in other forms. They don't actually drink glasses of milk like Americans do, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference here, right? So milk is
Yeah.
like, it is central
to who you are as an Indian, and especially a North Indian at that, right? But even South Indians use milk to bathe their idols. So it's not a very easy thing to sort of go up against, right? It's a tremendous sort of cultural norm.
Well, that's why I'm so amazed that the doctor, because an American doctor would have said, "Well, just keep eating meat and dairy, and I'll give you a bunch of pills." But your
Yeah.
doctor didn't do that. Your
No, he
doctor
was
really,
enlightened. I was I was very lucky.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they were thinking of removing parts of my intestine and rewiring my stomach. When somebody said, "Go see this doctor," I had just come out of the ICU. I had just survived sepsis after kidney surgery. So it was actually a situation where yeah, and I was not quite 50 then yet, so it was quite a scary situation. And when he said it was diet, I mean, I was incredulous at first, I must admit, right? So he told me 3 weeks, try for 3 weeks. If you don't feel immediately better, then my diagnosis is wrong. But I'm telling you right now, you are severely allergic to dairy. So all
Oh,
your
it was an
spinal,
allergy.
yeah, it was
Oh,
an allergy, right? So you're so allergic to it. That's why your spine gave way, and you had to put hardware and fuse your spine
oh.
and put rods and screws, and all of this stuff is all connected to dairy. So
I mean, I know of dairy intolerance, of course, and I know about it I usually thought in Asia, and of course, India's part. I
so
understand the world
72% of
geography,
Indians
but
are lactose intolerant.
really,
Yeah, yeah.
isn't
So
that amazing?
yeah, it's amazing, right? So yeah, so and so there are lots of stories on the dairy side, but he was he's a person a great head, a little bit ahead of the curve on all of this stuff. He's what you
Mhm.
call a functional medicine doctor, right? So
Oh,
he's
great.
he's a cardiologist by training, but
Yeah.
he's a world-renowned acupuncturist, and does sacrocranial and all that stuff. So he's very, very good. I had him on the show as well, but
Yeah.
he particularly for me, he said, look, dairy, I mean, he didn't tell me don't go off meat or anything like that. I had already gone off beef and pork by that time, but he said dairy and so once I got off of dairy, I started to lose to 20 kilos almost immediately.
Oh,
I stopped bleeding. Like I used to bleed every day, so that stopped. So I didn't need to rewire my intestine. They healed themselves eventually, so it was
oh my
fine.
God. And
Yeah,
you think like the power of the human body, you can be sick for basically 5 decades
yeah,
and you give it 3 weeks of the right stuff.
yeah.
And there it is, helping you out.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
this is what I mean. If you, I mean, we've talked to Neil Bernard and Dr.
Love
Esselstein,
him.
all these people. They all say the same thing. There are plenty of patients, right? Within, and because the question people have is, well, I've done this for 40 years, and okay, if I go plant based, how, I might have to wait another 20 years, and why would I worry? I'll die, I'll die happy eating my steak. But the results are quite impressive,
It's
and they are quick.
stunning. Yeah.
Yeah,
Stunning. Yeah.
stunning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for any, forget, saving the planet. If you're not healthy, try this, and then yeah, of course, all the other things will sort of manifest eventually. That what you're doing is good for others, not only yourself. But yeah, so yeah, I was one of those people that essentially was sort of, slapped by my body to say, hey, wake up, right? You're gonna kill yourself
Wow.
by the
Yeah.
stuff
So
you're
you
eating.
had no choice, really.
I
It
had no
was,
choice where that dairy was concerned. But then I had, then my wife, on my 50th birthday, she said, look, you've stopped the red meat, and
you can do
you
it.
know, I've been vegetarian for 25, 30 years. Why don't we just give it up? Why don't we give up the eggs? And by that time, our household, we didn't bring any meat into the home, but the rule was that we brought in eggs. And the rule was that if you went outside and you wanted to have a, mutton or lamb or whatever, you could. But and she didn't sort of give me grief about that. But then on my 50th birthday, she said, why don't we just stop? So I'll stop the eggs, and we'll just stop it all, and just like that, again, cold turkey, stop everything. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
not that hard. I mean,
it's
granted, you
true.
you had an impetus to do it, but
Yeah.
not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, I had impetus to give up dairy, but I didn't have any impetus to give up everything else. I mean, that was, I think, by that time, I had become a sort of self-aware. I had found out what they do to, get the dairy and why and all of that stuff. So, I was a lot more aware of what is food, right? I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And once you know, you can't pretend you don't know.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, once
it's
you know that if you fall off the wagon, you're falling off because of sort of an addiction or greed or to satisfy your taste bud, not because it's good for you. So
Yeah, gosh, no.
so you pick. I tell people, don't be too hard on yourself. Pick yourself right back up and get back on the wagon. That's the
Yes.
only way to do it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I tell people the same, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Just every
Yeah.
day's a new chance. Just get right back on and let's move on.
Yeah. And I think you should sort of expand your dietary horizons. I think if you ate meat and potatoes, don't look for vegan substitutes for the same. Actually expand your diet. I mean, look at Thai
Yeah.
food, look at Chinese food, look at any Italian food that's vegetarian, right? I mean, you can eat
Yeah.
the whole, all cultures vegetarian, and you'll still be way better off than you were if you just had your regular, meat and potatoes or whatever that you normally had, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And your life will just expand, because I
just
think
expand.
really people just rely. I did. For me, it was ham and cheese sandwiches. And I just had the same thing all the time.
Right. Yeah, life's a lot more exciting even on the dietary side when you go vegan. Yeah.
And a lot more colorful, like you said. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We are at the hour, and you've been an incredible guest, as I thought you would be. And
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. It's great to have you amplify voices of good across the world. And thank you so much for sharing a lot of insights and key findings from your experience with our guests. Thank you so much for being on our program.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and really thank you for all you do.
Same here. Thank you, Elizabeth. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.